It's meme time, it's meme time. Gather all your friends, it's meme time. It's meme time, it's meme time. The only cure for sadness.
After Ichigo and his friends enter the Koryu, they immediately begin to run. After all, the walls from the Koryu are falling in and being sucked up by the Kotatsu cleaner, which is way too fast for the main cast. And if it touches them, it will erase their spiritual presence. Luckily, Ohime reacts quickly enough and used her Senten Kenshin and blasted the party out of the Koryu, letting them enter one of the Sarate's districts. After some wandering around, they find the Spirit Gate, but it is being defended by Jidambo, a literal giant wielding a battle axe for a Zanpakuto. Ohime and Chad immediately try to jump in, but Jidambo slams the ground with his Zanpakuto, making a concrete barrier around him and Ichigo. He wishes for a 1v1 against Ichigo, and as the fight starts, Jidambo does his special 10 attacks, but Ichigo blocks them all and ends the fight in a single blow, breaking his opponent's axe. After that, Jidambo cries about his axes, but proceeds to open the gate. However, a certain someone was waiting for them. Gin Ichimaru, captain of the 3rd squad. Gin proceeds to sever one of Jidambo's arms. Immediately though, Ichigo leaps forward at Gin in an attempt to strike him, but Gin thinks fast and points his short sword at Ichigo, only for it to extend in a split of a second as Ichigo just barely manages to block it. But the force of the strike sent Ichigo flying into Jidambo, closing the gate. Luckily, Ohime healed the severed arm. However, afterwards they end up meeting with the town's elder, and Yoichi comes up with a plan to invade the Sarate. However, it just so happens that a man named Ganju appears riding a boar right into the elder's home. As Ganju gets up, he makes eye contact with Ichigo, wondering what the heck is a Soul Reaper doing here, and confronts him. A small fight breaks out between the two, and it ends up being taken outside rather quickly. The village elder tries to convince Ganju to stop, saying Ichigo is a good Soul Reaper, but Ganju is convinced that all Soul Reapers are the same, that they are all bad. And as Ganju dashes at Ichigo, Chad, being a literal Chad, throws Ichigo his Zanpakuto. They fight for a few minutes, but as the clock strikes 9, Ganju calls his board and yells at Ichigo to rematch him, and then runs off with his gang. The next day, the party walked through a small village for some time, searching for the Shiba clan home, which is very easy since they got a whole sign up there saying, "Hey, I'm over here." After getting closer, some bodyguards appear telling them to get lost. However, when they noticed that Yoichi was with the group, they immediately apologize and guide them down to a tunnel to meet Kukaku Shiba, the leader of the Shiba clan. After asking for a favor and telling her the story, she understands it is going to assign a man to oversee the operation. As she opens the door to show who it is, it happens to be Ganju Shiba. Yeah, the same Ganju from earlier. We then skip over to the Sarate where we see Rukia getting transferred to a different cell with Renji escorting her, and being told that her execution will be in 14 days. As Renji leaves, he runs into Captain Aizen of the 5th squad. Aizen tells Renji that he thinks someone is behind this execution. Why should her execution be shortened so rapidly, and why use the Sokyoku to execute a Soul Reaper below the rank of captain? But before he can continue, a captain meeting gets called. We then transition back to Ichigo and Ganju clashing very angrily at each other, but Kukaku hits both of them and tells them to knock it off. She then leads them to a room, and as the door opens, they see a giant bloody cannon, and it literally goes to the sky. She hands Ichigo a Raishukaku core. That's definitely not how you pronounce it, I apologize. And she tells Ichigo to pour some of his spiritual energy into it, and he responds, "How the heck do I do that?" So Kukaku tells Ganju to show him how it's done, but Ichigo just refuses to be taught by him. Then once again, they both get rocked by Kukaku. Ganju eventually though does show Ichigo what happens when you pour your spiritual energy into it. It makes a shield around the core. This allows them to enter the barrier around the Sarate that would otherwise keep them out. Following this, everyone begins to train relentlessly. It then cuts back to the Sarate where we see Lieutenant Iba of the 7th Division, Renji Ibarai, heading to the Lieutenant lieutenant meeting. As they get there, they see Momo, lieutenant of the 5th squad, and Lieutenant Rangiku of the 10th squad showing up. She lets everyone know that it may take half the day for everyone to show up thanks to the chaos going around. Meanwhile, Ohime makes a just about perfect barrier, Uryu then makes a good but very narrow barrier, Chad is able to make an unstable but very strong barrier, but Ichigo is unable to make any form of barrier whatsoever. As it's getting late, dinner is made and the group is about to head off to go eat, but Ichigo stays behind to continue training. Everyone leaves except Ichigo and Ganju. Ichigo is getting a bit irritated by Ganju's presence, however Ganju decides to question Ichigo why he's going to go save the Soul Reaper. Do you owe her something? Ichigo replies no. Are you getting paid for it? Ichigo continues to reply no. Then why are you trying so hard? And he replies I owe her. She saved my life and I haven't repaid her yet. She gave her powers to me, a complete stranger, so I could save my family. I'm not some loser who would let her die without a fight. Ganju then rips the orb out of Ichigo's hand and gives him a tip on how to do it. Showed him how it worked, then afterwards he threw the orb right back at Ichigo and walks off. Meanwhile in the Sarate, a captain's meeting is about to go down. We see Gin Ichimaru showing up late for the meeting, and as he enters he notices the captain of the 13th squad is missing, as he happened to be sick once again. The captains get a bit riled up as Gin had failed to kill Ichigo. Then the head captain of the Gotai 13 speaks up and tells the captains to settle down. He then asks Gin Ichimaru what his explanation was. Meanwhile, the entire party is eating when they feel a giant spiritual presence from Ichigo, causing quite the earthquake. The party runs immediately to the training room, and as Kukaku opens the door, they see Ichigo making a barrier that is constantly growing. Kukaku then gives Ichigo advice to retain control, however in amazement he loses concentration once again, and the orb breaks. Back to the captain's meeting, Gin replies he doesn't have an explanation. He was careless and is willing to take punishment of any kind. But before anything happens, the emergency goes off, saying there is an intruder in the Sarate. Captain Zaraki immediately darts off with his lieutenant jumping onto his back, and he runs off. But as the captains leave, Aizen says to Gin, convenient time for the alarm to go off. And continues saying, do you really think you can get away with this? Moments before the invasion though, Ichigo and his friends are preparing to enter the Sarate, when Ganju decides that he wants to join Ichigo. He expresses that his brother was killed by a Shinigami, and that he feels like he'll receive answers to his questions if he follows Ichigo. After this, they all enter the cannon with the orb. Following this, Kukaku starts chanting, and upon finishing, the cannon goes off. They are immediately flying at a high speed in the air, but it's not enough, as there's a second step in this launch. Ganju pulls out a scroll that is the incantation of the second step and warns the party for everyone to evenly discharge energy into the orb, or else everything will fail and the party will end up dead. As Ganju begins the incantation, arguing occurs between everyone and Ganju messes up, and he is not able to complete the incantation in time. After colliding with the barrier, they manage to break through it though, but the orb's barrier breaks. Nobody is falling though. Quickly, everyone tries to grab each other before they begin to fall again, and Ganju grabs Ichigo. Chad grabs Ohime, but seeing that Uryu's about to fall out of the electric circle, he jumps towards Uryu, throws him at Ohime, but in the process he gets thrown out of the swirl. They end up getting separated into 4 groups, and luckily land safely but in completely different areas. Ichigo and Ganju land together in an alley with 2 Soul Reapers. Chad lands in a tree. Yoichi lands safely as the Soul Reapers don't know where Yoichi even went. However, Ohime was partly injured from the impact, but Uryu performed first aid on her to help reduce the pain. Ohime and Uryu though luckily land in a very quiet area, so there doesn't seem to be any Soul Reapers nearby. Meanwhile, we then see Ichigo and Ganju arguing over running or fighting, and Ganju dashes off. However, he is chased off by an elegant Shinigami named Yumichika, while the other Shinigami named Ikaku Madarame does a lucky dance and begins to fight Ichigo. Meanwhile, Ganju ends up at a dead end, but he uses a spell named Seppa to turn the wall into sand. It allows him to pass through the wall, but what Ganju didn't know is he ran into an old execution grounds, a pit where criminals and hollows that were alive would be thrown down in. As Ganju is on the edge, Yumichika gives him a choice, either fall in the pit or be slain by his sword. Meanwhile, while Ikaku fights Ichigo, we see Ikaku take something from his hilt and put it on the top of his eye to stop the bleeding. Right after he heals his injury, he asks Ichigo who trained him. Ichigo replies Kisuke Urahara, and Ikaku recognizes this name and decides to go all out as he screams, "Extend! Huzuki Maru!" Ikaku's sword then turns into a spear that can break into 3 chained parts. This catches Ichigo off guard as he gets hit in the right arm, and they continue to fight. Eventually, Ichigo strikes Ikaku's spear, partly shattering the top end of it. And as Ikaku is looking at it, Ichigo immediately jumps back into action with high speed. Ikaku unprepared attempts to block, but ends up having his Zanpakuto breaken in 2 and is badly wounded. Ikaku refuses to give up though. Even if it meant death, he charges at Ichigo once again. Ichigo slices Ikaku, causing him to pass out, mostly due to blood loss and insane injuries. Meanwhile, Yumichika uses his Shikai Fuji Kujaku as it turns his blade into a 5 sickle blades on one hand. Ganju responds with a chili pepper smoke bomb, which completely backfired on Ganju, but he just ends up running away again, just trying to escape Yumichika's elegancy. Back to Ichigo, he ends up using the healing ointment that Ikaku had on himself and Ikaku. As soon as Ikaku awakens, they talk a bit, but Ikaku specifically warns Ichigo of his captain, saying he will be after Ichigo because he is the strongest member. While all this is going on, Oryu and Ohime are just vibing on a roof, watching out for Soul Reapers and being stealthy. But as Ohime points out, a Soul Reaper appears behind her. Oryu reacts by saving Ohime from being sliced in 2. Meanwhile, Ganju, who is very beat up right now, seems to be near his last stand. Before Yumichika attempts to finish off Ganju though, they hear Ichigo yelling for Ganju, trying to figure out where he is. Ganju points out that if Ichigo's running around like that, he probably killed his friend Ikaku. Yumichika, shocked by his words and in denial, causes Ganju to have a brief moment to quickly grab some fireworkers that were behind him and throw them in Yumichika's face, being able to run away once again. However, Yumichika quickly recovers and continues to chase after Ganju. Eventually catching up to him, Yumichika flash steps behind Ganju and slashes him up in the back, sending him flying. Right now, Ganju is dangling off the edge as he is nearly about to fall into the old execution grounds, in quotations. Yumichika approaches Ganju and tells him to just die beautifully, but this was the moment Ganju was waiting for. He uses Seppa on the edge, which surprises Yumichika and turns the edge into sand, causing him to nearly fall off the edge. Eventually, Ganju manages to defeat Yumichika through these methods. We then cut to Uryu and Ohime fighting a Shinigami. Ohime counterattacks with her power, but the Soul Reaper destroys the attack and hurts one of Ohime's Shun Rikas. The Soul Reaper appears right behind her, Isabel slashes Ohime again, until Uryu shoots an arrow at him, stopping him from hurting Ohime. The Soul Reaper activates his Shikai by saying "Spread your wings, Suzaki Garasu." I did not pronounce that right either, but who cares about this Shinigami? He's an L. A walking L. As he says the line, he has his palm on the top of the blade, and pushes it down as it splits into multiple shuriken-like objects. The Soul Reaper then introduces himself as Jirobo. The Soul Reaper is easily outmatched though, and in his anger he attempts to attack Ohime once again, but Uryu quickly saves her once again, and finishes off the Soul Reaper with tons of arrows, sending the Soul Reaper flying, destroying his Seketsu chain, which means that he'll live, but he won't be able to be a Soul Reaper anymore. Meanwhile, Ichigo and Ganju end up being surrounded by Shinigami, so they grab a hostage. However, because the hostage is a part of the 4th squad, also known as the Relief Squad, their opponents could literally care less. Luckily, an explosion of sorts happens, like someone blasted through the wall, taking out half the Soul Reapers. Ichigo and Ganju take this opportunity to make a lucky break, and as the dust clears, we see that the one who caused the blast was none other than Chad, and with ease, Chad takes all the other Shinigami out. Meanwhile, all the way at the 4th Squad relief station, we see a captain named Kurasuchi trying to force answers out of Ikaku. Ikaku, however, isn't saying a word and claims to know nothing of the Ryoka. He was swiftly defeated before he even knew they were there. Kurasuchi then claims that he is gonna punish him right now. However, as it happens, Ikaku's captain appears, Zuraki Kenpachi. He confronts Kurasuchi, questions his authority to punish other squads other than his own members, and then Kurasuchi just leaves very angrily. Zuraki questions Ikaku, wondering how strong this person was, what he looked like, and his objective. Ikaku gives all the details and hopes for his captain to have a good fight. We then cut back to Ichigo and Ganju, and then now introduce Soul Reaper Hanataro. Ichigo then yells at Ganju for bringing the Soul Reaper along. Ganju replies that he was distracted and forgot that he was carrying him. Ganju and Ichigo now attempt to figure out where to go to get to the cell Rukia is being held in, and Hanataro overhears the conversation. Hanataro tells them where Rukia is and about a secret pathway of getting there. They then end up going through the secret pathway, where we learn that Hanataro wants for Rukia to be saved as well. Hanataro tells them about how he met Rukia. Meanwhile, all the lieutenants are now together when a Soul Reaper confronts all the lieutenants to give them a damage report. He tells them about how the 3rd C and the 5th C of Squad 11 have been defeated. Meanwhile, we cut back to Ichigo and Ganju now exiting the secret pathway, with Hanataro mentioning that there is no direct way there, but that this is the closest exit. They look up to see a giant white castle of sorts that is the prison, and as they take in the view, there is a person on the stairs who is known as Renji Abarai. Immediately, Ichigo steps forward as they both draw their swords and both begin to battle. While Ichigo's allies are worried at first, Ichigo is actually pushing Renji back. And while Ichigo and Renji are in a sword clash, Renji decides to ask Ichigo some questions. He asks, how do you intend to save Rukia? There are 12 more lieutenants and 13 more captains. If you want to save her, you have to defeat all of us. Do you really believe that you can do that? And Ichigo responds that he has to. That he will crush everyone. That anybody that gets in his way is going down. Upon hearing this, Renji just activates his Shikai, and as soon as he gets that power boost, it is revealed that before entering the world of the living, captains and lieutenants must suppress their power by 5 times, meaning this Renji is 5 times stronger than the Renji that Ichigo fought in the world of the living. Meanwhile, 2 lieutenants, Izuru and Momo, are searching for Renji. Izuru finds Renji's lieutenant badge in his room, but he hasn't informed any of the captains as he doesn't want Renji to get in trouble. Back to the fight between Ichigo and Renji, Ichigo is mostly on the defensive. While they talk throughout the fight, we learn that Renji blames Ichigo for everything that's happened to Rukia. And as they are fighting, Ichigo is starting to see a pattern in Renji's movements. He realizes Zabimaru can only extend 3 times, meaning if he can dodge the 3rd one, then he can win. However, Renji catches on and strikes Ichigo easily before doing a final strike. However, Ichigo remembers Uehara's training about resolve, being able to swing a sword not with fear but with intent. Ichigo then manages to catch Renji's Zanpakuto and attacks before Renji could again, breaking his sword and putting a giant slash down his chest, sending him flying into the wall. We then skip to a flashback of Renji's past. It is him as a kid when he met Rukia. We see that they met when they were scavenging for food in the slum districts. Rukia was strong and so was Renji. They have stronger spiritual pressures than the rest of their friends. They often fought and played as kids, but as they grew older, some of their friends sadly died. In fact, they were the only 2 remaining in their group, and they decided to become Soul Reapers since life is supposed to be better in the Serite. While they are in the academy, Rukia ends up being adopted by Byakuya Kuchiki, captain of the 6th squad. Renji tries cheering Rukia up, saying she won't have to go hungry and she gets to be part of a noble clan, and that she's now instantly passing and graduating from the academy. However, in truth, he didn't want to let her go, but he didn't want to get in her way either. As it returns to the present, we then see Renji walks up to Ichigo and yells at him to please save Rukia. Both Ichigo and Renji fall to the floor due to their injuries, and Ganju and Hanataro run up and try to get Ichigo's body out of there, since about 5 people are heading towards them, so they gotta hide. They manage to hide and some of the lieutenants see Renji's body. They end up choosing to save Renji rather than chasing after Ichigo and the others, putting Renji's life above catching the criminals. Following their escape back to the secret pathway, Hanataro begins to heal Ichigo. Meanwhile, Byakuya tells the lieutenants to throw Renji in a cell, calling him a fool for challenging Ichigo alone and losing. Momo tries to speak up, but Kira stops her and apologizes to Byakuya. Then, after Byakuya leaves, Gin steps in and tells him that he will get word to the 4th squad. Eventually, as Gin leaves, Toshiro then sneaks up on Momo, warning her of the 3rd squad, and not to trust them so easily. Following this, the head captain Yamamoto speaks to all of the captains, telling them they are allowed to use their full power. While Hanataro heals Ichigo, he says that he thought this wound was fatal, but it's very shallow, thanks to a mask that protected him. It's like a hollow. Why does Ichigo have it?
L is for lovers who love one another. A is for ass, of which I like to eat. U is for you're the only one for me. G is for the only gamer I see. H is for happy, I'm always feeling. When you put them together, what do you get? Put them together, what do you get? What do you get? What do you get?